1 week after I quietly paid for my son's $95,000 wedding, his brand new bride walked into my kitchen with a notary at her elbow and a stack of papers she was certain would leave me sleeping in my truck. She slid the document across my table, tapped the signature line with one manicured finger, and told me to sign away the ranch my late wife left me, or she would make my final years a misery. She looked at my cracked hands and my dusty boots and saw a beaten old man with one last thing worth taking. What she did not see, what she never once bothered to check, was that the paper she was forcing on me was not my ruin at all. It was hers. Before I tell you how a greedy woman signed her own financial destruction at my kitchen table, do me a kindness. Subscribe, and let me know in the comments what town you are watching from tonight. It warms an old rancher's heart to see how far these stories travel. Now, let me start where it began. One honest note before we begin. This story is a work of fiction. The voice you are hearing and the images you are seeing are AI-assisted. Names, places, and events are invented for storytelling. Any resemblance to real people is purely coincidental. But the lessons about family, greed, and quiet strength are very real. Now, let us begin. My name is Cal Boyd. I am 71 years old, and I have spent nearly every one of those years on the same stretch of high grassland in eastern Montana, running cattle the way my wife's family ran them for 100 years before me. My hands are cracked from 6 decades of barbed wire and cold mornings. My back does not straighten the way it used to, and I wear the same 3 flannel shirts on rotation until my son tells me I smell like a feedlot. I drive a truck older than my grandchildren. To anyone passing through, I look like exactly what most of the world thinks a rancher is: a tired old man scraping a hard living out of hard country. That impression has been the most useful thing I own, and I have spent a lifetime doing nothing to correct it. There is a wisdom out here that the cities have forgotten, and it is this: the man who looks like he has nothing is the hardest man in the world to rob, because there is no target painted on his back. I learned that from Nell's father, a leather-faced old cattleman who drove a truck held together with baling wire and fence staples, and who was, when he died, one of the wealthiest men in 3 counties. He used to tell me that the day you start looking rich is the day the wolves start circling, and that a smart rancher keeps his money the way he keeps his best bull, out of sight and behind a good, strong gate. I took that lesson to heart, and it served me for 50 years, and it was about to serve me one last time against a wolf who had walked right up onto my porch. The ranch came to me through my late wife, Nell. Her family, the Harlows, had held that land since before Montana was a state, and when the last of them passed, it came to Nell. And when Nell passed 3 winters ago, it came to me. On paper, that land is worth around $16 million, and I will not pretend it is not beautiful. 5,000 acres of rolling grass under a sky so big it makes a man feel like a fence post. But here is the first thing you need to understand about that ranch, the thing that matters most to this whole story. A big ranch is not a pile of money. It is a hungry animal that eats money. And beneath its beautiful surface, that ranch carried a debt heavy enough to break the back of anyone who did not understand exactly what they were holding. 20 years ago, Nell and I made a decision that nearly everyone told us was foolish. We borrowed heavily against the land to double our herd and modernize the whole operation, betting the ranch on our own ability to run it. It was the right bet, and it built us a real living. But it left the ranch carrying roughly $12 million in loans, structured with a large balloon payment that came due in chunks over the years. I have made every payment for 2 decades on time because I know that land the way I know my own heartbeat. But the debt is real, and it is personal. And any fool who took that ranch without the knowledge and the cash flow to feed it would be swallowed alive within a single season. Remember that. It is the whole trap, and my daughter-in-law walked into it with her eyes wide open and seeing nothing. Because here is the part almost no one knew. The ranch was never where our real wealth lived. Nell was the daughter of ranchers, but she had a mind for markets that her father never understood. And across 40 years, she quietly took the money we did not spend and grew it into an investment portfolio that had nothing to do with cattle or land. By the time she died, that portfolio was worth more than double the ranch, held safely in a trust that she and I had built with the help of a careful attorney, entirely separate from the land and entirely out of reach. The ranch was the thing everyone could see, beautiful and heavy and dangerous. The trust was the thing no one could see, quiet and safe and real. I lived like a poor man because, in the ways that showed, I was one. The wealth was invisible, exactly the way Nell wanted it. Nell and I talked in her last months about what would happen after she was gone, and she was not a bit sentimental about it. She had seen too much. She had watched her own cousins tear a family ranch to pieces over an inheritance, watched good land get sold off in parcels to pay lawyers who were fighting over who deserved it, and she was determined that our life's work would never end that way. So we built the trust carefully, and we structured the ranch carefully, and we agreed on one hard principle that governed all of it. Money should go to the people who have proven they can be trusted with it, and to no one else, no matter whose blood runs in their veins. I promised her I would hold that line even if it cost me my own son. I did not know, when I made that promise, how soon and how completely it would be tested. I have one son. His name is Cody, and he is 36, and I love him, though love and pride are not always the same thing. Cody never took to the land. He found ranch work beneath him, dusty and small, and he left for the city the first chance he got and built a life of appearances, always reaching for the next thing that would make him look like more than he was. I never pushed him back toward the ranch. A man has to choose that life, or it will grind him to nothing. But I did keep the truth of our finances from him, because Cody has never in his life been able to hold a secret or resist a shortcut, and I knew that the day he learned there was real money behind the old man, he would stop building anything of his own. So I let my son believe, like everyone else, that his father was just a broke old cattleman with a beautiful piece of land and empty pockets. I know some people will hear that and think I was a cold father, keeping such a secret from my own boy. Maybe I was. But I had watched what the mere expectation of money did to Cody, even without the money itself. As a young man, he made no plans that did not quietly assume the ranch would one day fall into his lap and solve everything. He drifted from job to job, quit the moment work got hard, and always, underneath it, there was that lazy certainty that he would never really have to build anything, because someday the old man would die and the land would make him rich. If the mere shadow of an inheritance could hollow out my son like that, I shuddered to think what the reality of a $40 million trust would do to him. So I kept the shadow small, and I waited, and I hoped he would grow up before he ever had to know. 2 years ago, Cody brought home a woman named Shauna, and I knew what she was before she finished her first glass of wine at my table. Shauna had a way of looking at a room, at the furniture, the truck in the yard, the cut of a man's coat, and totaling it up behind her eyes, and I watched her total up my ranch and my dusty life and reach a conclusion. She decided I was land rich and cash poor, an old fool sitting on $16 million of grass he was too simple to unlock. She was half right, which is the most dangerous thing a schemer can be. She saw the ranch and thought she saw a fortune. She never once imagined that the fortune was somewhere else entirely, or that the ranch she coveted was a loaded gun pointed at whoever tried to grab it. I have met a great many people like Shauna across my life, though rarely so pure an example. They share a single blindness, and it has ruined every one of them in the end. They believe that wealth is a thing you can see, a big house, a big herd, a big number on a piece of land, and so they spend their lives chasing the appearance of money and never once learn the truth of it. A real rancher knows that the size of your spread tells you nothing about the health of your operation, that the biggest ranch in the county can be the one closest to the bank taking it. Shauna looked at 5,000 acres and did the only arithmetic she knew, which was to multiply the acres by a number she found somewhere and call the result her fortune. She never subtracted a thing. People like her never do. Cody and Shauna married a little over a year later, and the wedding was far grander than my son could afford, and Shauna made it very clear, in 100 small ways, that the bill was mine to pay. I paid it. $95,000 for a single afternoon of flowers and champagne and a band nobody listened to. And I wrote the check without complaint, because I had already decided I would give Shauna exactly enough rope to show everyone who she was. She thanked me with the thin, automatic warmth of a woman who believes she is owed. And I smiled and said it was my pleasure. And I watched her eyes move, even at her own wedding, back toward the ranch, calculating. I knew, standing at the back of that reception, that she would not wait long. Greedy people never do. They cannot enjoy what they have for wondering how to get more. I watched my son dance with his new bride that night, and I felt a grief I could not share with anyone in that room, because I could see, plain as a coming storm, that Cody had not married a partner. He had married a strategy, and he was too dazzled to know it. She had chosen him not for who he was, but for who she believed his father to be. A rich old fool ripe for the picking. And my son, hungry as he had always been for someone to make him feel like more than he was, had walked straight into it. I wanted to pull him aside and warn him. I had wanted to 100 times. But a warned man in love only clings harder to the thing he is warned against. And so I held my peace, and I danced one slow dance with the bride, and I felt her already measuring me for a coffin. She waited exactly 7 days. 1 week after the wedding, on a bright, cold morning, a car I did not recognize came up my long gravel drive, and Shauna stepped out of it in a sharp gray coat, followed by a nervous-looking man carrying a small stamp and a logbook, a notary she had hired for the occasion. Cody was not with her. That told me everything I needed to know about how this marriage was going to run. She came up my porch steps without waiting to be asked, walked into my kitchen like she already owned it, and set a leather folder on the table where Nell and I had eaten breakfast for 40 years. Then she smiled at me, a smile with no warmth anywhere in it, and told me we needed to discuss the future of the ranch. The notary she had brought was a young man, plainly uncomfortable, who kept his eyes on his logbook and would not look at me directly. I felt a little sorry for him. He had been hired to stamp a document and had clearly not been told the whole story. And now he was standing in a stranger's kitchen watching a well-dressed woman lean on a tired old rancher, and even he could feel that something was wrong with the shape of it. But a notary's job is only to witness a signature, not to judge the justice of it. And Shauna had chosen him precisely because he was young and green and would not ask questions. She had thought of everything, she believed. She had thought of the notary and the document and the timing and the pressure. She had thought of everything except the one thing that mattered. which was what she was actually taking. I did what I have always done best. I played the part she had already cast me in. I made the notary a cup of coffee. I lowered myself slowly into my chair like the tired old man she saw, and I asked her, in a small and uncertain voice, what this was all about. And Shauna, believing she was in complete control, laid it all out for me. She said that a man my age had no business running a spread that size alone, that it was time to think about the family's future, that she and Cody would take over the ranch and see that I was cared for. Then she opened the folder and slid a document across the table, a transfer of the ranch and all its holdings into her and my son's names. And she tapped the signature line, and she told me, still smiling, that this was not really a request. Now, I want to tell you what I felt in that moment, because it was not what you might expect. I did not feel rage. I felt a strange, quiet clarity. The same clarity I feel at 3 in the morning when a heifer is in trouble and there is no one to help me but myself. Everything narrowed down to the task in front of me. Because I had read that document upside down as she slid it across the table, 40 years of ranch contracts having taught me to read a page from any angle, and I saw in an instant what Shauna, in all her greed, had not. Her cut-rate lawyer had drafted a standard transfer, and buried in its ordinary language was a clause that appears in nearly every such document, one she had clearly never read and certainly never understood. The new owners, it said, assumed all existing debts and personally guaranteed all encumbrances on the property. She was so fixed on the $16 million number in her head that she had never once asked the only question that mattered, which is whether a $16 million ranch is worth $16 million in your pocket or $12 million in debt around your neck. She had done no due diligence. She had ordered no title search, requested no financial statements, hired no one who knew the first thing about agricultural lending. In 40 years of ranch deals, I never once bought so much as a single bull without knowing everything there was to know about it. And here was a woman reaching for $16 million of land on nothing but a number and a hunch. She had simply seen a big number and reached for it, and in her haste, she had drafted a document that would transfer to her, along with the land, a personal guarantee on $12 million of debt, including a balloon payment I happened to know was coming due in a matter of weeks. She was not handing me my ruin. She was handing me a pen and asking me to help her sign her own. I have signed a great many documents across 71 years, loan papers and lease agreements and cattle contracts, and once, the hardest of all, the forms that let my Nell go peacefully at the end. I know what a signature costs. I know that a name on a line can build a life or end one, can save a ranch or lose it. And I have never once in my life signed anything without reading every word of it first, no matter who was waiting or how they hurried me. It is the single most important habit a man in my business can have. Shauna did not have it. She had drafted a document worth millions, and she had never truly read it, because she was too busy imagining what she would buy with the money to notice the debt she was buying instead. In the end, the whole story turns on that one difference between us, I read. She only wanted. So I signed it. I want you to sit with that. I picked up the pen, and with a hand I let tremble just enough to sell it. I signed the ranch over to my son and his greedy wife, and I let a tear that was not entirely acting slide down my cheek. Because that was Nell's land, and there was real grief in the moment, even as I sprung the trap. Shauna could barely contain her triumph. She had the notary stamp it, snatched the folder shut, and swept out of my kitchen without so much as a thank you, certain she had just stripped a foolish old man of everything he had. She left me sitting alone at my table, and I let her believe she had won. Because the beautiful thing about a trap like that one is that the animal does the rest of the work itself. Here is what my daughter-in-law did not know. The knowledge that would have saved her if she had bothered to seek it. That balloon payment, just over $2 million, was due in 3 weeks. For 20 years, I had met every one of those payments through the careful management of the herd, the leases, and the ranch's cash flow. Work that requires knowing 1,000 small things about running that specific land, none of which Shauna possessed. The moment the ranch became hers, so did the payment, and so did the personal guarantee she had signed in front of a notary. When the bank came calling for $2 million, they would not be calling me. They would be calling the woman whose name was now on the deed and on the guarantee, the woman who did not have $2 million and did not have the faintest idea how to make the land produce it. I did not sit idle in those 3 weeks. I drove into town and met with Owen Fry, the attorney who had helped Nell and me build the trust and manage the ranch's affairs for 30 years. Owen is a slow, careful man who reads every line of every page. And when I told him what Shauna had done, he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes and started, very quietly, to laugh. He had spent 30 years watching me refuse to sign anything I had not read 3 times, and now he was hearing that my daughter-in-law had forced me to sign away a debt-laden ranch using a document she herself had failed to read. He said it was the most perfect example of a thief robbing herself that he had encountered in a long career full of thieves. He confirmed what I already knew. The transfer was valid, notarized, and binding. Shauna and Cody now owned the ranch, free and clear of me, and they now owned every dollar of its debt, personally guaranteed, with no recourse back to the man who used to carry it. She had made herself the legal owner of a financial obligation that was about to detonate, and there was nothing anyone could do to put it back in the box she had so eagerly opened. The 3 weeks passed the way they always do out here, cold mornings and long light, and I went on tending the cattle I no longer legally owned, because a rancher does not let animals suffer over paperwork, and because I wanted the herd healthy for reasons of my own. Then the balloon payment came due, and Shauna discovered all at once what she had actually purchased. She got the notice from the bank, $2 million owed, her name on the guarantee, 30 days to pay. She called Cody, and Cody, who had no money of his own and had always believed the ranch was simply free wealth waiting to be claimed, called me in a panic, demanding to know what was going on with the debt. And I told him, gently, the truth I had protected him from his whole life, that the ranch had always carried that debt, that his wife had signed for all of it, and that it was, legally and completely, no longer any concern of mine. The days that followed were ugly. Shauna came back to my ranch, and the sharp gray coat and the cold smile were gone, replaced by fury, and then, when fury did not work, by desperate pleading. She accused me of tricking her, of hiding the debt, as though I owed her a full financial disclosure on a robbery she had come to commit. I reminded her, calmly, that she had walked into my kitchen with a notary and a document she wrote herself, that she had forced my signature under threat, and that at no point had she asked a single question about what she was taking. I had not hidden anything. She had simply been too greedy to look. A person who steals a locked box has no right to complain about what is inside it. She had wanted the ranch so badly that she never stopped to weigh it, and now the full weight was hers alone. The bank did exactly what banks do. Shauna could not make the balloon payment, and she could not run the ranch to produce it, and within a few months, the land went into foreclosure. And this is the part that I confess gave me a grim satisfaction, though I take no pride in it. When Nell's family ranch went up for auction on the courthouse steps, cleared of its former owners and its debt reset by the sale, there was a quiet old cattleman in a dusty coat standing in the back of the small crowd. And when the bidding was done, that ranch came home to me, bought free and clear, with a small piece of the fortune Nell had hidden away for exactly such a rainy day. I paid a fraction of what the land was worth because a foreclosure sale is a cruel and efficient thing. And I walked off those courthouse steps, once again, the owner of the only home I have ever known. Standing there with the deed back in my hands, I drove out to the ranch and I walked the fence line at Nell's favorite spot, the rise on the north end where you can see the whole spread laid out below you, the place where I had asked her to marry me 50 years before. And I told her, out loud, the way I still do, that I had kept the land, that the wolves had come and I had let them think they had won, and in the end, they had handed her family's ground right back to me. The wind came up over the grass the way it always does at that hour, and I chose to believe it was her, telling me I had done right. Some men would call that foolishness. Out here, alone with the land and the memory of a good woman, a man learns to take his comfort where he can find it. Shauna was not so fortunate. The foreclosure did not erase what she owed. Because she had personally guaranteed that debt, the bank pursued her for the shortfall between what the ranch sold for and what was owed, a deficiency of well over $1 million that followed her long after the land was gone. The woman who had marched into my kitchen, certain she was seizing a $16 million fortune, walked away instead owing more money than she would earn in a decade, chained to a debt she had signed for with her own hand in front of a notary she herself had hired. Her arrogance had written a check that her whole life could not cover. She had come for my death warrant and signed her own, exactly as I had known she would the moment she failed to ask the one question that mattered. I did not celebrate. I want to be honest about that. There was no whiskey poured, no laughter, no triumphant phone call. When the news of her ruin finally reached me, I was out in the north pasture at dusk, checking on a cow that had calved late, and I stood there in the cold blue light with my breath fogging, and I felt mostly a deep and weary sadness. Sadness for my son, who had chosen so badly. Sadness for the family we might have been if greed had not walked in and sat down at our table. Even a strange thread of sadness for Shauna herself, who had wanted so much and understood so little, and had destroyed herself reaching for a prize that was never what she thought it was. Justice, I have found, rarely feels like victory. Most often, it just feels like the end of something that should never have had to happen at all. My son did not escape clean either, though his punishment was of a gentler and more useful kind. When the ranch collapsed and the debt came due, Shauna's love for Cody evaporated as quickly as it had appeared, because there had never been any love in it, only the pursuit of money she now understood he did not have. She left him within the year, and Cody, humiliated and broke, and finally stripped of the illusion that his father was a fortune waiting to be unlocked, came back to the ranch with nowhere else to go. And I did something I had wanted to do for 30 years. I put my son to work, not as an heir, as a hand. Up before dawn, out in the cold, learning the land one hard lesson at a time, the way I had learned it, the way Nell's people had learned it for a century. Something changed in Cody out there in the grass and the weather. For the first time in his life, he was building something with his own body instead of scheming for something with his mouth. And slowly, over the seasons, the soft, grasping man he had been began to harden into someone I recognized. Someone with dirt under his nails and a quiet pride in a day's honest work. He does not know, even now, the full size of the fortune his mother left behind, and he will not know until I am certain the money would land on a man strong enough to hold it. But he is closer to being that man than he has ever been. Losing everything to his wife's greed was the most valuable thing that ever happened to my son. It cost him his illusions, and illusions are the most expensive things a man can carry. I have thought a great deal about that word, illusions, in the quiet since all this happened. Cody spent 36 years carrying the heaviest illusion there is, the belief that someone else's money would one day rescue him from the work of becoming a real man. It made him lazy, and it made him vulnerable, and it very nearly cost him everything, because a man built on the expectation of rescue will always, sooner or later, attract someone like Shauna, who is happy to help him spend a fortune that does not exist. Losing that illusion was brutal. I watched it break him for the better part of a year. But a man cannot build anything solid on top of a lie, and until that lie was torn out of him, roots and all, there was no ground firm enough to build a real life on. Shauna, without meaning to, did my son the greatest favor of his life. She took away the thing that was killing him. The portfolio Nell built, the invisible fortune that outlasted the schemers and the storms, I have finally decided what to do with. Most of it will go, when I am gone, to a foundation in Nell's name that helps young people from ranch families learn the business and the science of working the land, so that the next generation of cattlemen are not so easily fooled by a big number, the way my daughter-in-law was, and are not so easily driven off their own ground by banks and by grief. Some of it, held in trust, will one day reach Cody, but only through the slow, conditional path a man has to walk to prove he has become someone who can carry it. Nell would have wanted it exactly that way. She spent her whole life proving that the quiet, patient thing is almost always stronger than the loud, grasping one. I sit on the porch some evenings now, an old man, alone, with a good dog and a bad back, and I watch the light go down over land that has tried to be taken from me more than once, and has always, somehow, come home. And I think about how close it all came. If I had been the man Shauna believed I was, a simple old fool with no counsel and no plan, I would have lost everything. The ranch, the grief-soaked house, the last of Nell's family's 100 years on that ground. Instead, because a leather-faced old cattleman once taught a young husband to keep his money out of sight and read every word before he signed, the wolves came and went and left the ranch stronger than they found it. There is a justice in that which I did not design and cannot fully explain. I only know that patience, in the end, outlasts greed almost every time. This is a work of fiction, and the voice you have been listening to is not a living man. But the lesson underneath it is as real as a fence line at first light. For 71 years, I have watched the difference between the people who look and the people who leap, and it is always the leapers, the ones who see a shiny number and lunge at it without asking what lies underneath, who come to ruin in the end. My daughter-in-law looked at an old rancher in a dusty coat and saw a fool with a fortune he was too simple to protect. She never understood that a real fortune is never the thing you can see, and that the man who looks the poorest at the table is very often the one holding all the cards. They wanted my inheritance. In the end, the only thing they inherited was the ruin they built with their own hands. My name is Cal Boyd, and the land my Nell loved they tried to steal it, and instead, they handed it right back to me, cleaner than they found it.